From the KSL Broadcast House, this is Sunday Edition with Doug Wright.
Good morning and welcome to Sunday Edition. Happy Easter to you. I'm Mike Hedrick filling in for Doug this week, and today we're talking about the big religious holidays this weekend, with both Passover and Easter falling at the same time this year. And the nation's first laws regulating social media use by minors going into effect right here in the state of Utah, with parts of the rest of the country considering following suit. But first here, the potential for flooding that we are seeing this spring. I am joined by Wade Matthews from Utah Hazard and Mitigation via Zoom. Wade, great to see you. Thanks for taking a few minutes today.
Thanks, Mike.
Now, after this record year for snow, I'm sure you and your team are pretty hard at work preparing for flooding now that it's finally started to warm up and starting to. What do you predict for our flood season this year?
That's a little bit difficult to exactly pinpoint, but we do expect that we're going to be seeing flooding at various places around the state. There's just record snow, record water content. We know that there's going to be a lot of water coming out of the mountains. We know that we've got some improvements in our water storage and water ditches and so on, but we expect that we'll probably still see some flooding.
So what are you doing? What's your team doing to help get ready for this water that we know is coming?
We've been doing a lot of things. We've been meeting with local emergency managers to help them review plans and procedures. We've been conducting public outreach campaigns to increase awareness and preparedness at the individual level. We've been working with the state and with locals to provide 1.5 million sandbags around the state. And we're working with mitigation and planning. We're doing a lot of things right now to help prepare the state for what potentially could be a bad flood season.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking to someone earlier today who said, hey, listen, a bunch of my neighbors are thinking, hey, we need to get sandbags. Let's get sandbags in place just in case there's flooding. But his comment was, well, I don't know if I want to do that because I don't know if there's going to be flooding in my area, and I don't want to get all those sandbags in and then have to take them all out. I think this is probably a common thought for a lot of people. And the question really is, how do I know what the potential for flooding is in my area, especially with this runoff?
That's really hard to say, but you can go to floodhazards.utah.gov, and after a couple of clicks, enter your address, and it will tell you if you're in a mapped flood zone or not, which is a little bit higher risk of flooding. But we also say wherever it rains, it can flood. Wherever it snows, it can flood. And we're seeing so much snow in the mountains right now. But there are so many factors, you know, with the temperatures, with groundwater, whether you're in a flood zone or not. There are so many factors. So it's really hard to say specifically where it's going to flood. So we just encourage people to consider their risks and do what they can now to prepare.
Will you say along the Jordan River that there's potential for flooding there? Is that something where you have snow, the snow melt that's emptying in there, or is that more a flood zone for if you had heavy rains?
I think it would apply to both, actually. You know, and there's a lot of rivers and streams that we're looking at, and just the Jordan rivers, even the small streams coming out of the canyons are going to see a lot of high, fast-moving water.
So you'd say people who are concerned about this, go to the map, take a look at that, see if you're in a flood zone, and if you are, err on the side of caution. And that would be one of the things. We were talking about some cities earlier this week, at Lehigh, Provo, and there's a number in Salt Lake County as well. They're offering up the sand there. I think the state even hasn't they? There's different spots where you can go fill sandbags.
We're encouraging people to contact their local public works or emergency management departments to find out where sandbags and sand are available. But yeah, the state has provided, as I said earlier, 1.5 million sandbags, but we're distributing them to the counties and letting the counties put those where they feel they're needed the most.
So you're going to see, you probably have an idea, I'm guessing, right, where the main areas would be where there's potential for flooding or a higher potential for flooding. But it's those smaller ones that, do they just kind of create themselves because you just don't know? You have so much snow up there that's melting and going to be coming down at whatever pace that is. Are there just some areas where it's like, man, I have no idea if it's going to come in this area or not?
Exactly. And there's multiple types of flooding. We could see that runoff. We definitely know we're going to have the runoff, as I mentioned, in the rivers and streams. but we're also starting even to see seepage into basements from groundwater, the water table rising. This is caused by, the snow melt getting into the ground and flowing, has to flow someplace. Eventually that gets to our aquifers, which is a good thing. We need to recharge our aquifers, which is our drinking water, our culinary water, et cetera. But that, in the meantime, can start showing up in basements as well. So, I mean, it's really just impossible to say exactly where it's going to flood.
Is the flood of '83 a repeat of that, a potential here? Or have we made progress in many different ways that we're not going to see something like that? Because certainly the snowfall is higher than it was back then. The amount of water in that snow is higher than what it was back then. Do you think we progress and put some things in place to where it wouldn't be to that degree, even though we will see flooding?
Yes, I think we've definitely seen those improvements. And I don't want to say that to let people think they don't need to prepare. We still need to prepare, but yes, we've added additional reservoirs, large reservoirs to store the water, before it gets to the dangerous places or where it can start flooding people. Improved canals and waterways and so on. And so there have been improvements made since 1983. That's to the point where I don't think we'll be seeing another State Street River.
Thank goodness. The last thing we need is a State Street River, right?
Right.
All right. Well, Wade, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time. Great information there, and people should get prepared right now, if I'm hearing you right.
Absolutely. And dem.utah.gov is the place to go. That'll also take you to the place where you can plug in your address. So just dem.utah.gov for all the flood information that we have.
I'm going to head over there right now. All right, Wade, thanks again. We appreciate it. Stay with us, everyone. We'll be talking about the historic laws on social media going into effect here in Utah. That's coming up next on Sunday Edition. Welcome back. We are back with Senator Mike McKell joining me to talk about the new social media bills that Governor Cox signed into law this past legislative session. Utah is the first state to enact any laws limiting just how kids use and access social media. And it's coming at a time of heavy debate around social media use and influence in our country. All right, good to have you on. We appreciate you taking a few minutes.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So tell me a little bit about why this bill is really such a big deal for the state of Utah.
Right, and let me just start by, I care about this issue for a lot of reasons. I have kids, I have 4 kids, I see the impact in our communities. During the legislative session, the CDC actually released some new data that was startling. There's a lot of negative impact on our boys, but there's some really startling data for our girls. So this CDC study looked at 17,000 surveys from 9th grade to 12th grade, and a stat that jumped off the page to me is 30% of our girls had seriously contemplated suicide. Again, I mean, let that sink in, 30%. 57% of our girls had sustained periods of loneliness and depression, and it continues to spike. And we've looked at it as a state. Obviously, the governor now, he's got a new office on families. Amy Winder-Newton runs that office. And as we looked at social media, it was a collective effort. Representative Tusher in the House really led out, and we came together with some really creative solutions to try to tackle our mental health crisis.
So what are the parameters of this bill, this new law? What are the parameters surrounding it so that people understand?
So first and foremost, parental consent is a big part of the bill. We want parents engaged. We want them to have tools so they can regulate and monitor their kids' social media accounts. Some of the other things that I think are interesting, I don't know if you watched President Biden in the State of the Union address. He specifically said it's time to stop big tech from experimenting on our kids, and then he said 2 things. We need to ban targeted advertisement, and we need to ban data collection of our kids. And Senate Bill 152 actually does that. It bans data collection. And when we go down that road where we ban targeted advertisement, Representative Tusher, really brilliant legislator, his bill, the House bill that passed, creates a presumption that social media is harming our kids. I think we all agree in the legislature, at least, that it's harming our kids. He tackles the harmful algorithms that we're seeing where content is fed to our kids. And what we're trying to do is give parents tools, the tools necessary to really feel empowered to be able to monitor their kids with their social media accounts.
How is this actually implemented? It all sounds great, right?
Yeah.
And I think most people are probably on board with it. How is this implemented, though?
That's a great question. So over the next year, the penalties in the bill will go into effect next March. But over this course of this year, our Division of Consumer Protection, Katie Hart actually leads that office. She's an attorney and she works in that office. really brilliant mind. She's going to work on creating the parameters through rulemaking. We're going to have 4 new employees, and sometimes people say, well, is 4 employees enough? That office is going to receive complaints. We're going to build this verification process with stakeholders, and it's going to happen over the course of this year. And we're excited to see, we're excited to get feedback, and we're working hard to make sure we get it right.
One of the hard things, I'm a parent of 4 as well, and one of the toughest things is when you try and put these safeguards in. As a parent, it's like, for me, I don't know Chinese. It's like trying to read Chinese. Like, I have no idea how to do it. It takes me through so many things, and at the end, I don't even know if I got my kids protected. Can it be simplified? Is it going to be simplified?
We hope it's going to be simplified. You and I are exactly the same way with my own kids. I've got, thankfully, I'm down to two teenagers. I've got 2 a little bit older, but we struggle every day. And as we've gone out and we've talked to parents, parents want tools, parents want to be empowered. But the reality is sometimes our kids are a little smarter than we are.
Yes.
And we hope these tools, as we work with tech companies through the Division of Consumer Protection, we hope that it's simplified. Some of the cool things we did in the bill, I think that parents will appreciate. There's some default settings. Those accounts will turn off at night. They'll come back on in the morning. But we want parents empowered, so those default settings can be changed by a parent. As parents are watching what their kids are doing, they can do that. And I think these tools will be helpful.
I'm just glad to see, I mean, when you talked about those percentages in the very beginning, they're mind-blowing.
They are.
It's hard to imagine the effect, not just on the young women, but the young men as well.
Right.
How dangerous this stuff can be and how important it is to have these parameters in place. Are we going to have to take further steps beyond this? I hate to get too far out into the weeds, but is this enough, or are we going to need to take further steps?
I think we're going to learn. And one of the things that's really one issue that's really surprised me is how much this issue has resonated nationally. I hope Congress acts. I know as we've worked with our teams here in Utah with legislative leadership, we hope this takes off. We know that Congressman Chris Stewart is working on this issue. President Biden has called out this issue. We hope that Utah is a model that other states can look at. Obviously, we're going to learn. The problem is, to me, I think we're in the 4th quarter. I think the devastating impact of social media has already hit this generation of kids. I think we're going to look back and wish we had acted sooner, despite the fact that Utah is leading in the nation with this legislation. But it's not too late. We are going to have an impact. But I really hope other legislatures across the state and Congress are paying attention, and I think they are. I hope we see broad, sweeping change.
Yeah, and you say it had been great if this was earlier, but unfortunately, it seems like it took those instances and things happening to our youth in order for these decisions to be made. I'm sitting here thinking, what President Biden said and so many other lawmakers that are demanding at this time that things be done. I'm not sure 2-3 years ago we had that as widely spread as we do right now.
Yeah, and I think you're right. I think the data that we have before us now and some of the research, Brad Wilcox was a really good researcher at University of Virginia that the governor's talked about. We've looked at his data and so many other researchers. The data is available now. We are going to look back and we're going to wish that we had acted sooner. Despite being the first state to really move forward, I think we will look back and we'll regret that we didn't do it sooner. But I'm optimistic. I'm an optimistic legislator. I look at the policy we're making. I think it's the right policy, but I think we're going to learn. And I think we're going to learn some things that we missed, and we'll adjust as we move forward.
Yeah, and help us as we move forward to the future. I love that. All right, Senator McKell, thank you so much. We appreciate you taking the time.
Hey, thank you for having me on, and happy Easter.
Happy Easter to you as well. Stick around, everyone. We'll be right back. Welcome back. I'm here now with Rabbi Alan Scott Bachman at House of Prayer for All Peoples and the Director of Interfaith Dialogue Services at Emerald Hills Institute, Zainab Kari-Parduk. Many of our viewers already know this, but we actually film this show ahead of time on Fridays. So when this airs, it'll actually be Easter morning as well as the middle of Passover. So the two fell on the same day a few years back, but it doesn't happen very often. Both of you, welcome. Thank you so much for being here. Along those lines, Rabbi, tell me, as we talk about Passover, we talk about Easter, what is the correlation here between the two?
Okay. Well, first of all, Passover has a lot to do with the Messiah. It's a special time when Jews actually pray about the Messiah. Even the 8th day of Passover, that would happen, for instance, in the United States, there's a recitation from Isaiah about the wolf lying down with the lamb and what the Messianic era would look like. So the whole concept of the Messiah is obviously integral in Passover, and of course, obviously integral into Easter. But there's other more general, overarching themes that they both have. For instance, in Passover, it's a time for humility. We eat matzah. Matzah is basically about the most humble bread you could have. It has no water in it. It's a humble bread. And we think about our ancestors, and we put ourselves in the role of the people who left Egypt thousands of years ago. You might see it today, like with Latter-day Saints. They go to Wyoming to
like
experience,
a trek, right? Like a pioneer trek.
Yeah, what was it like for the pioneers? Well, as Jews, we're always thinking about what was it like for our pioneers in any way, our spiritual pioneers, and what we've been through in the past. And that also keeps us humble, along with the matzah. And this humility opens us up to cleaning, spring cleaning, cleaning ourselves and refining our souls, purifying ourselves in sort of a three-step process. So a lot of people think of Passover, but as Jews, we have three festivals. Passover, obviously the one everybody knows, we'll call that the first one, leading towards Shavuot, the giving of the Ten Commandments, the Torah at Mount Sinai, which is about 49 days away from right now.
How do you celebrate that?
And that's celebrated with obviously prayer services, but also seeking revelation and studying Torah.
Personal revelation, seeking personal revelation?
It could be personal revelation, yes, opening up to that and studying Scripture. And so let me back up a little bit and say Passover you can think of as like the engagement to God.
Okay.
We're getting engaged. God, in a sense, gave us a ring by not having us be slaughtered along with the other firstborn, as well as saving us at the Sea of Reeds, splitting the sea. So we got engaged to God, in a sense, at the Sea of Reeds. At Shavuot, which is the Festival of Weeks, about 7 weeks from now, we are marrying God, with the Torah being given to us as sort of like the marriage document, what we'd call in Judaism the ketubah. You could call it the ketubah. And then the third festival that's in the Torah, what you might call the 5 books of Moses, is Sukkot, which is normally in the fall, and almost always in the fall. And Sukkot is the festival of booths. So I'll backtrack again. Passover, you get engaged to God. At Shavuot, you marry God. And at Sukkot, at the Festival of Booths, you're now, after the marriage, dwelling with God in your own tabernacle, because you could call it the Feast of Tabernacles. And so it's all part of that setup with these different festivals being like energy centers to re-energize ourselves, to start taking us away from the distractions of everyday life so we can spiritually charge ourselves and rise to a higher spiritual level.
Yeah, and focus on God and your relationship with God, and you have it at different points throughout the year. I love that.
Yes.
Let's talk about Ramadan for a moment. A lot of people may not know anything about Ramadan, so kind of give me the 101 on what Ramadan and how it's a benefit to people of all faiths.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for this question. Ramadan is one of the holiest months Muslim world celebrates and observe. And basically, we fast from sunrise to sunset, 30 consecutive days each year. And since we follow lunar calendar, each year Ramadan moves 10 days earlier. And basically, we refrain ourselves from food and drink. And we try to, by refraining ourselves from food and drink, and we try to become closer to God. And Ramadan is not itself remaining hungry, and it has different elements, such as spiritual. It has spiritual element and physical and social. So we remain hungry for God's sake. That will make us closer to God. Closer to God, and it strengthens our relationship with God. Also, we try to avoid bad deeds, falsehoods, and some wrongdoings. Because when you only keep yourself from food, it is not the exact point. So you also need to be a better person. And our Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, says, those who are not avoiding bad deeds or falsehood, then God doesn't need your hungriness. So you just need to better yourself in order to fully accomplish fasting's mission. On the other hand, it has social element. So when you are hungry, you became aware of all the hunger, poverty all around the world, and that increases our sense of charity. So we tend to give more. We tend to share more with others. How we celebrate? 30 days long, we come together with our friends, family members, and neighbors, and we open our doors more than usual, and we share our bread with our neighbors, and we get to learn from each other. As we get to learn from each other, we increase love between neighbors and friends. So it has. Fasting is multidimensional practice that observed by Muslim world, and as we approach our non-Muslim friends with the invitation, hey, come to our Ramadan dinner, and they come and they share their practices with us, and we share our practices with them. It is just learning opportunity for us, and we became friends. And I think in this society we are in a time we need more friendship, love, and harmony more than anywhere else.
I love both of these, love, humility, and putting your focus on a higher power. Thank you so much, both of you, for coming in here and educating us a little bit.
Oh, you're
Appreciate
welcome.
the time.
It's our pleasure. Thank you for inviting us.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us for this episode of Sunday Edition. We hope you'll join us next week. Music and the spoken word coming up next.